Now, we got a taste of the sun this weekend. Everybody, it seemed, was out and about in it. Ice cubes were at a premium in all of these supermarkets. And now everybody really wants to know, when will we get to go on holidays and what will we have to do to get there? So to try and simplify that, let's talk to an expert, the editor of Air and Travel magazine, Eoghan Corry. Good morning, Eoghan.
Good morning, Mick. I'll do my best.
You're just back from Spain, I hear.
Well, I was out in Spain for the first major face-to-face event, the tourism event. Fitur is the name of it. There are 3 huge tourism fairs every year, and nothing has happened since Fitur at the beginning of 2020. So it was sort of agreed this would be the trial run. International UNWTO, the United Nations World Tourism Organization, is based in Madrid. So they had a conference, and the Spanish Tourist Board put together. It was the first real smell of what's happening in world tourism as everybody works their way through this crisis. We're not alone in having been to hell and back over the last 12 months, so it was very, very interesting talking to tourism ministers, CEOs of tourist boards, what the shape of what we're looking at in the coming months will be, Mick.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, when you look at the gatherings in our major cities, near takeaway pubs that are operating with takeaway facilities, you can see almost psychologically we're behind other countries, it would seem, when it comes to reopening. I know that Spain is going to open up on the 7th of June. But, you know, for instance, last week, the Brit Awards were held in London. 4,000 people didn't socially distance. They didn't wear a mask. And here you have the situation where an expectant couple can't be together for a scan. It looks as though we're way behind everywhere else.
Very simple solution. I think you put your finger on it. We have lots of places for people to enjoy themselves in a controlled environment. People places that are used to serving alcohol and managing all the complications that come. They're called pubs. We have 7,000 of them. If they had been open this weekend with social distancing and all the requirements that are there, we wouldn't have that outcry, that outrage all over our papers this morning, all over social media over the weekend. I think we're creating extra obstacles for ourselves as we reopen. When everything in Portugal is open, apart from the nightclubs, Greece is open. I was in Spain. They were going through the phases, and different regions were opening pubs at different levels. They're very careful. They've social distancing and the requirement of wearing a mask outdoors dining, apart from the actual time that you're dining, was there. They had incidents last summer, particularly with the British arriving out in Magaluf. Some listeners would be very familiar with Mallorca and what happens in Magaluf late at night. So when the Brits arrived last summer, while the Spanish had very serious regulations in place, they were just alcohol and COVID doesn't mix very well. So they have been taking the lessons, particularly from Magaluf last summer. Spanish bars, listeners will know, usually stay open late. They're effectively old-style Irish closing time around 11 o'clock, feeling their way through it. There is a proviso here that obviously dining outside and drinking outside has a different meaning when the temperature is 30 degrees, as it was in Madrid when I was there last week. But what they have done is, and they were very good for outdoor, that plaza culture, sitting outside anyway, is done what a lot of Irish towns have done, is taken over the car parking spaces in front of the restaurants and expanded that. So indoor is virtually non-existent. Everything is outdoor. And we have to learn, we have to stop cannibalizing ourselves and going into that sort of those sort of high dudgeon stuff that we got at the weekend, with people tweeting about, oh good lord, people are out in the street standing, and start managing it the way other European countries have done. It was a very big lesson for me, and I did think about it a lot over the weekend. Okay, let's look at the people who are looking on the websites, looking at the airlines' websites and saying, will I book, won't I book? Will I be safe? Will my money be safe? Will I have to push it to next year? What will I have to do to get on a plane? Will I have to get an antigen test? Will I have to have a PCR? Will I have to be double vaccinated? Will I have to have the green certificate? What would you advise people now with Spain opening on June 7th? Portugal and Greece are already open. Everything is open in Portugal except the nightclubs. What would you advise for people who are looking at family holidays, say, in the coming months? keep all those factors, those two main factors that you outlined there, Mick. Am I going to be safe? Am I going to be keeping my family and neighbours safe when both out there when I return, and also is my money going to be safe? They're the considerations. Remember, it's illegal. Non-essential travel is illegal, effectively illegal in Ireland until July the 19th. So don't do anything to go against public health policy. After that, what we'll be looking at is the experience when we get out there. Is it going to merit a holiday? And the experience of getting there, is it going to be uncomfortable or expensive? Now, we're getting a clearer picture with every 48-hour period of how that's looking. We know that the countries we're going to are going to have all sorts of regulations because, what we went through in January, Portugal went through in February, their rates went even higher than ours, but now they're back down to below half of ours. So they're managing it all very well. So they're not going to do anything silly. So we will see socially distanced areas and beaches, the use of pools, regulated capacity in restaurants, capacity in bars, and it is working. And as I say, we have about a 6-week lead in watching all of this and to how other people react, because once the figures start going the wrong direction, nobody wants to go back to where they were. The money is really important. What we saw last year was a slowness, a reluctance, and in some cases an ultimate refusal to pay back money that had been paid. Go to your travel agent. You're going to be protected with money when money is spent with your travel agent. But also bear in mind airline policies, because they're not all the same. Like the Aer Lingus policy, if you have a very generous, the most generous policy probably of any airline in Europe, where you book until the end of December, you get a no change fee. So let's say you decide to book in November, to travel in November as of now, you book now, you actually can change that. Now you won't, if the price is a little bit more expensive, you'll have to pay the difference. Some people have been caught by that. Ryanair have a similar policy, but it's only up until the end of June. They're looking at their July and August bookings without that same flexibility. But let's say things go wrong, as they did horribly wrong, for instance, in January of last year, or one of the countries we go to in big numbers, things go horribly wrong, as happened with Portugal in February. They're likely to change that and allow the refund of the change fee. So watching your money being safe. Now, the third thing, and this is something that played out a fair bit in the media, we're signing up to the digital green certificate. Listeners will need no introduction to that. The 3 items that are contained on it. The technology is awesome. It's a QR code. Once you scan that in, they can see if you've suffered from COVID and recovered, if you've been vaccinated, and they'll also, if you've done a PCR test, you have a facility to add that. That's what I used to go to Spain for my own essential travel last week. The girl at the gate, we just tapped my boarding pass and up popped my PCR test. It can be expensive. It's about €90 for the main private supplier doing it in Ireland. It's about €50 on return. Who will need that after July the 19th? Most likely those who have not been vaccinated. And here we are into what different countries might interpret. Is it one course of, let's say, AstraZeneca and Pfizer are both 2 vaccination courses? Is it going to be you'll need both of those or just one? And the other thing is, if we as a nation get our rates down to where Northern Ireland is now, for instance, just around 50 cases per 100,000, we're a little bit over that. We're just over 100. So if we get our rates down, nobody coming from Ireland is likely to need a PCR test. That could happen as early as July. If we haven't reached those numbers, we're still looking at a PCR test, because I don't see a situation where teenagers are going to be vaccinated by then. It's coming down. People in their 20s in Northern Ireland obviously are getting vaccinated now. It could be that the number of people vaccinated in Ireland will be down to that level, but unlikely to be as early as July. So looking a bit later. Sorry for going on a bit longer.
No problem, Eoghan. Just a couple of things on that. You can understand why some families are reticent to book when whatever you need in Ireland to get out and whatever you need in Ireland to get in, There is also, of course, the requirements of the receiving country, your destination. And that needs to be checked out. I mean, you might be okay in Portugal, Greece or Spain, but if you're going further afield, you may be running into stronger restrictions. And that can have a complication both ends. Other people are wondering, I've got 4 kids and me and the wife, that's 6. If I've got to get 6 PCR tests, that's 900 quid. That really puts a cheap flight, not a cheap flight.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting, because what we've had over the last year is a Rubik's Cube of relationships with 27 countries. So every single one of them, sometimes they have different regulations arriving from within the European Union. And that's before we go into the long haul. So what the European Commission want to do, and what they brought in July the 1st, is let's bring the Rubik's Cube under control, guys. A clear set of regulations for all 27 member states. We are not completely signed up to that, and we've a track record of dragging our heels and cherry picking the European regulation because we don't really we want to see what's happening elsewhere and want to see what's going on before we sign up for it. So but I'd expect that to work its way through the system, and that by August we will have the same clear set of regulations. And you're absolutely right. For instance, coming back into Ireland, everybody over 6 will need a PCR test. That's how it stands at the moment. Some countries, it's 16. Some countries it's 18. Some countries it's 48 hours. Well, ours is 72 hours before. Some countries, Northern Europe is a big fan of antigen tests. The Irish medics are being almost derisory about antigen tests. So all of that gives these different ranks. We're only talking about within the European Union. Now, you alluded to something else. What happens outside the European Union? And this really matters for one country, America. We've huge transatlantic ties. We've huge connectivity. We used to have 27 flights a day to North America. So one of the solutions to that is a travel bubble with America, where Ireland says to America, your vaccinated people can come here and our vaccinated people can go to you. And a huge number of the American population are vaccinated. That would be hugely helpful for the inbound travel industry. That's a little bit down the road, because we're still getting to get our heads around travelling within Europe. Europe says travel is important, and that we've got to stop this thing of pulling up drawbridges and behaving like 27 different countries, because we are one economy and there is an enshrined freedom of movement. We need to get back to that. It's going to be a slow enough process. It has been a slow enough process, and as you said at the beginning, I think we'll be at the back end of that queue, Leo. I could have said that publicly. We're going to be at the back end of that reopening. But the real difference between where us talking this morning and us talking last week is we have a date, and that's a big, big start.
Some relevant text coming in here, Eoghan. They're saying the vaccine passports will start on July 19th. Will people be able to get the vaccine passport immediately, or will it be a few weeks after the 19th? I just want to know when to book my holiday, says Sarah.
My instinct is that we will need about a fortnight from July the 19th to start getting our head around this and get it together, get the systems in place. The vaccine passport will be available immediately. The reason they don't use, the countries objected to the word passport being used. The reason that we use digital green cert is so it won't be confused with your official passport that you carry. It's going to be on your phone, and there are going to be problems. I don't want to start producing problems when we just found the solution, but there are going to be issues with databases and all of those sorts of things that have to be overcome, and we're going to have to feel our way through those. Interestingly enough, we don't have the best record for our health service, and our vaccine rollout is one of the slower end of Europe. But on the digital side, Ireland is really well organised. For people who are looking for information, there are loads of apps out there claiming to give you all the information, but the one that the airlines use, and it's updated immediately for every change of regulation in every country in the world, is one called Thematic. It's not an app on your phone. It's actually designed so that commercial apps can't access it that easily, that real people will go into it. And think of Tim was the dog in the famous Five, and if you're putting him in the attic, Tim Attic, that's what you do. Put it into your search engine, and Tim Attic's map will show up.
Tim Attic's map, okay.
It's the best. It's the best source of internet, and that's what the travel agents use, and that's what the airlines use.
Okay, a couple of quick questions to blast at you. Could you ask Eoghan Corry, is there any possibility of Aer Lingus flying from Cork to Spain in the summer before the airport closes? If Dublin Airport's going to be so crowded, it would make sense to have Cork open, says Joan Keating.
It makes absolute sense, and that all will completely depend on the bookings that are coming into the system. We have a very adventurous multiple flights daily to Malaga, multiple flights daily to Faro and Portugal that were the same sort of connectivity we had in 2019. In fact, we have 4 new routes that we didn't have in 2019 out of Dublin, but it makes absolute sense for Cork to open for some of those Spanish routes and those Canaries routes. The reality is that won't happen until they see some movement in the booking system. And while there has been a lift since Friday, Irish people were burned before. They're not going to be running. And to repeat what I said, because it has to be emphasised. The first 2 weeks after July 19th are going to be a bit of a trial. Bit of a trial is good news for price. You'll get lower prices. Bit of a trial could be bad news if you've got an angry teenager wondering what happened.
Speaking of, how about teenagers, unvaccinated teenagers? Can they travel with the required tests?
Unvaccinated teenagers are going to need a PCR test as it stands. Talking to the Spanish tourism minister last week, I pressed this point within the teenage market, so important. He said, we don't see a situation that teenagers will not require a PCR test unless, and this is a big one, Ireland gets its rates down to below 50.
Okay, and we're at 100. Okay. Children travelling to Portugal, will they require a PCR test?
Same regulations apply to Portugal. There could be, and the same proviso comes with the numbers. The difference, the important that children under the age of 6 will not require a PCR test in both cases.
Okay, this is a general comment, but I suppose we have a cohort of people who won't get vaccinated. But this comment will cover that as well. I'm allergic to vaccines. Does that mean I can't go to the sun?
Pretty much a PCR test. If you don't have your vaccine, you need your negative test.
Okay, but you may have to quarantine. For instance, let's say you're going to the Emirates. They may have a policy in place where unless you're vaccinated, double vaccinated, and you're in on a PCR test, you may have to quarantine for 4 or 5 days. So that needs to be researched as well.
We haven't even touched the quarantine. As it stands, everybody coming back into Ireland must quarantine for 14 days. They will test you after 5 days and you can release. That's what happened in my own case. But when I arrived back from Spain on my essential work visit, I was still self-isolation for 14 days. After 5 days, you get released. Now, will that change? We've heard no indication that will change because you do get the impression, Mick, that there are different sets of advisors working on different fields of this, and you also have the political decision making from the advice from NEFIT. No real clarity as to what will happen with quarantine. And remember, I'm just talking about nearly the whole focus of what we're talking about this morning is inter-EU, and 70% of all our holidays go to Spain and Portugal, so they're really the countries I've been concentrating on. Once you go in beyond that, you're dealing with a completely different set of regulations. But what will happen is that at EU level, the negotiations will be held there, not at Irish level.
Okay, a couple of quick ones. I've kept you a long time, Eoghan. Thank you for that.
Always a pleasure. I can stay all morning. Yeah.
Can I ask if a PCR test is needed for special needs kids like Down syndrome or with autism?
Yes. PCR tests in all cases. There are possibilities for going through a medical process where, the PCR test, if somebody needs to travel, absolutely necessary travel, that you won't need a PCR test, but don't even start to go there. And I'll tell you why. The PCR test is going to be looked for by someone on the check-in desk at your airport or at the gate in an airport. They're not into big, long explanations. It's going to be looked for at the gate. Obviously, it's going to be looked at when you arrive. You have a locator form you have to fill out online before you go to Spain and Portugal as well. You have to upload the proof of the PCR. The technology is awesome. It really works. You upload the document, they look at the QR code, see it, and let you through. What I've been finding, what I've been hearing since the beginning of this, when you've got something complicated, even with tons of with all the right paperwork, you end up with someone who probably didn't finish secondary school education at a gate, not letting you through. And then, we've had cases of people turn back with all the documentation at a desk in America. The immigration people in America turned back people who had all the proper documentation. And even though they went back on 2 different occasions to get through, the point I'm making is you may have the case, you may have the medical documentation, but you're dealing with sometimes a bit of an attitude of someone who has all the power to turn you back.
I think a lot of people are going to stay at home this summer and maybe say we'll put it off till next year.
In that specific case, if you were arriving without a PCR test and with the proof that you don't need it, you're not going to be dealing with someone who knows what the full regulation. Sometimes they don't even know their full immigration.
Oh, and the questions keep coming, but I have to kind of end it there. 2 quick ones. Do you see flights to the Canaries from Cork at Christmas?
Yeah, very likely. I think once we're up and running, Cork we'll be back. Yeah.
And do babies and small toddlers need PCR tests?
No, absolutely not, under the age of 6.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks for your expertise, Eoghan. That's Eoghan Corry. Thanks a million. Thank you. Editor of Air and Travel magazine. And we have one final text from Paddy. And this is, I'm just going to leave it sit there rhetorically, because he says, all talk of travel is academic, as Houlihan and the Nefertarians will have us all back in level 5 by the 12th of July. Watch and see, says Paddy.
Neil Prendeville, the voice of Cork. Weekdays 9 to 12. Cork's Red FM. Red FM. Red FM.